So, Miranda, what did we do yesterday?
We went to Caesarea yesterday, and that is basically like a little port on the Mediterranean Sea that was built by Herod originally, and then it was kind of built on and on. Am I right? It was built on and on, kind of over itself after that, and that was really cool. We drove up there, and we paid to get in, and it wasn't that much. And we ate at this really nice restaurant called Port Cafe, and I had a cappuccino and some sweet potato ravioli, and everyone was jealous of my ravioli because it was awesome. And then we made our way kind of west to us down the shore, and we came across like the areas or like the ruins where like people with chariots would basically race around and crash everywhere because I guess they thought that was hilarious to watch. And we kind of just poked around in like a few caves and stuff, and then we went all the way down to where the palace was supposed to be, and you could actually go down like into the water, and like in the water there are rocks there that are perfectly cut, and you can kind of see like exactly how the building was from just like walking around. And then we took a few photos, and I kind of posed as if I was like from The Little Mermaid on the rock, and then when I was doing that, like my whole lower leg got soaked because of this huge wave that came by, but it was still fun. And then we went upwards, and because it was like built like here's the ocean and here's kind of, it just kind of elevates from there, and so we went up and we got to see like a lot more of like the tile floors that were still there. Like you could still see all of the designs that were there, and a bunch of like kind of newer stuff that had to do with like marble pillars and that were still up there. And then we went and we found this huge what's it called? Amphitheater.
The theater? Okay.
And then we found an amphitheater that was still in use, and there were still parts of it that were made of the original stone, and so we poked around there too. And me and my mom stood there and sang some Disney songs when no one was around, just to see like how good the acoustics were. And then we made our way back, and we got locked out, and because it was the beginning of Shabbat. It was the beginning of Shabbat, and so they had closed at 4, and so us and like 2 other tourists were kind of like locked in to the beach, and we were kind of freaking out because like everywhere that we went, like the gates were closed and we just couldn't get out. And finally we thought that David would have to go back and get the car all the way from like this weird exit that was like on the other side of the entire beach. And then like just when we were about to say like, okay, let's just do that, we found one of the gates was just a wooden gate, and it wasn't like, you could get out by like this little like opening about like yay big on the bottom. And so we kind of took our turns and just kind of crawled out, and it was really awkward because there were people outside and they were just kind of like, what are these people doing? But it was still fun. And then we went and we looked around this little gift shop, and I got my first thing in Israel, which was it was like a jeweled turtle, and it opened up at the shell, and it was really pretty. And to commemorate the first word I learned in Hebrew, which was turtle. So that was fun. And then after that, we went to
Mount Carmel.
You ready?
Yeah.
So after that we went to Mount Carmel, which was kind of a monastery, and we walked in, and there's like this giant statue of Elijah, because it's like the mountain that it was on was the mountain where Elijah was basically telling off these people who worshipped like demons basically, that like, he challenged them to this like thing. Let me redo that. So Elijah challenged these people to a competition, and they both set up altars on this mountain, and they said, okay, we're going to see whose God is real by asking and praying to them to see which one lights on fire without any of their doing. So they were just going to like pray and see if it happened. And so like the opposing people were like worshiping Baal, and they were just like cutting themselves. They were like doing enchantments or something, and they were just like going like flipping nuts on this thing, and like nothing was happening. And then Elijah basically was like, okay, we're gonna make this hard, and he like poured a bunch of water on his altar and basically he prayed like a really simple prayer, and like fire just like burst out of every little like bit of that altar. And then afterwards Elijah was like, ha, I'm right, so I'm gonna kill all of you guys now. So that happened, and there was like a statue with Elijah kind of like standing over this guy who looked terrified, and Elijah had like a sword and he was like, ah! And so we took pictures in front of that. And then if you actually go into the church, or on top of the church, you walk through like this little tiny like shop, and then you go up these stairs, and there's like this thing that looks like a compass on the ground, and it shows like each point. It's instead of like showing like north, east, west, south, whatever, it shows like all of the different places of Israel, like a bunch of different places. And so you could just like stand and see like, okay, Megiddo's over here, Nazareth is over here, you know. It was really cool to see, and the view was amazing. And we also had taken this little trail where, because we had never taken it before, and so we just kind of decided to, you know, try it out, and it led to like this other place that had a nice view, because it was like there's like a sign that said like, come see the view. So we're like, okay. But I don't think it was as good as the one on top of the church, just because it was like on a higher ground. And then we kind of poked around at the shop. We poked around in the room with, it had like writings on the side and benches, and then something at the front, and this little tiny thing off to the side that had like sand and little candles in it. And I think if I remember correctly, it was like you pray and you light a candle and you put it in there. So that was really cool to see. And then we hightailed it out of there. And then we saw Megiddo, which is my whole like favorite part of the trip, and will probably stay my favorite part. And we got to see this fortress that was built on this like hill, and it was still there, and it was like one of the first sites that they kind of like dug up, and so they didn't do a really good job of it. So there's kind of like rubble everywhere where it shouldn't have been, because people just kind of like threw it off to the side. But what was there was really cool, and we got to like, when we walked in, the first thing you saw was like these walls, and David had explained that they were like 3 different walls, and they were gates, and it was like this really nice like fortified place, so that like each gate would have to be broken down just to get inside, when normally it's like 1 gate. And then we kind of went through the rubble, and we got a lot of really nice pictures, and I got all dressed up, and we got to like get pictures with like the entire Megiddo Valley in the background, because that's kind of like where Armageddon is supposed to take place, because Megiddo translates, the mountain of Megiddo is called Har Megiddo, and so when the Greek would try to say it, they would say Armageddon, and that's kind of where like the word comes from. So we kind of like looked at it, and we talked about like how the whole entire thing was supposed to be filled with like blood, and this is like a huge valley, so it's kind of crazy to think like, okay, well maybe it might not be literal, but there's gonna be like a lot of bloodshed here someday, if not kind of already, because there was a lot kind of in the past, but there's gonna be more, so that's great. We're gonna look forward to that. And then there was like this little place on like the side of it, and it kind of went down, and you could see like all the tour groups were kind of going down, and they would like never come back up. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then we looked down there, and all you could see was like the staircase that went down, and then like a little tiny shed. And so we went into the little shed, and it was like a cave that went down, And that was extremely scary because what they did was they dug out like this huge hole basically, and you went around in like a spiral stair, and then it went down even more. And what they did was like you could see like 3 or 4 stories down. I want to say it's like 3 or 4 stories, but they put like these like stairs that you could totally see through, and they didn't even have like the back of the stairs, so it was literally just like this, and like we were trying to walk down it, and me and David and my mom were like extremely afraid of heights. And well, I don't know about my mom, but me and David were, and I was just kind of like going down it like a step at a time, to the point where I like at one point I went and sat down and just kind of like crawled my way down there, because it was just really freaky like looking down because you could see right through it. But when we got down there, there was this spring, because the fortress, like, you had to have water somehow, so they basically like hid their own spring that they had underneath the like cave, just so that they could have fresh water and so their enemies couldn't. And that was really cool to see. The spring wasn't going, but there was still water there, so that was really fun to see. And we took a few more pictures there, and then when we left, we decided to take the exit that was like recommended. And when we went outside, we figured out that we were on like a totally different side of like the hill, so we had to like walk all the way around just to get back to like the Megiddo spot. And then we went back home. Yeah. What did we do next?
That's it.
Wait, say
Wait.
one more thing. Talk about that big altar that was there, that was super old.
When we were at Megiddo, we saw this altar, and it was a really large one, and it was basically made of uncut stone, and it was one of the ones that had steps on it, and it was just really interesting to see like this giant altar that was, you know, in a well fortified place, which means like it had been, you know, well used by the people of that time in that area. And it was just interesting to like think of how many like, you know, cows or something that had basically been like killed on there. It was just really interesting, and it was huge. I have nothing more to say about it.